Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to American Homicide with Jake Ryder. I am Jake Ryder, and today we are going to be talking about some interesting cases. Our first case that we're going to dive into today is the story of Carolina White. She was reunited with her birth parents 23 years after being abducted. So let's get into it. In the second volume of Netflix's reboot of the classic true crime series Unsolved Mysteries, one episode explores the tragic back-to-back kidnappings of Christopher Dansby and Shane Walker, the boys who were abducted in the same Harlem playground just 3 months apart in 1989 when they were 2 years old and 19 months old respectively. Though it's been more than 30 years since they last saw their children, however, Dansby and Walker's parents are still holding out hope that they'll be reunited with their sons, bolstered by the story of another Harlem native, Carolina White, who essentially solved her own kidnapping case after 23 years in her abductor's custody. While separated from her parents in 1987 until 2011, making hers the longest child abduction case to be solved in the Center for Missing and Exploited Children's history, as well as the first in which a kidnapping victim led to the reunification efforts, the center's Bob Lowry told the Connecticut Post in 2011. Here's everything we know about White's miraculous case, from her shocking kidnapping to her triumphant reunion with her birth parents. So who kidnapped Carolina White? Well, White was abducted from New York City's Harlem Hospital Center in August of 1987 when she was just 19 days old. Joy White and Carl Tyson had brought their newborn daughter to the hospital after she developed an infection with a high fever. Within a few hours, she was smuggled out of the hospital by Ann Petway. Petway, who was loitering around the facility for at least a few weeks, if not months, before the abduction, the police told New York Times, had been dressed as a nurse and interacted with White's parents upon their arrival at the hospital. White was discovered missing in the early morning hours of August 4th, and a security guard reporting having seen a woman matching Petway's description leaving the hospital around 3:30 in the morning. Petway raised White as Nadra Nance, nicknamed Betty, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, with the help of her own mother. White told New York Magazine in 2011 that while Petway was somewhat distant, she was a responsible caregiver. I'm not going to say she was the best mom ever, but she did... I'm sorry, let me repeat that. I got miscaught there. Quote, I'm not going to say that she was the best mom ever, but she did what she had to do to make me who I am today, she said. She was strict, but she was cool. All my friends used to say that she was a cool mom. So, I mean, that's interesting. I don't think that's incredibly cool, but in the article too, there's images of Joy White standing next to her daughter's crib, like shortly after her Carolina White's kidnapping. I can't imagine, like, you bring home your child, and then like 19 days later she gets an ear infection, you bring her in, and then she's stolen by like someone who plays dress up. Like, that's frustrating. So let's figure out how Carolina White discovered she'd been kidnapped. Though White was already somewhat suspicious of the fact that seemingly bore no physical resemblance to Petway, the first real red flag appeared in 2005 when White got pregnant and asked Petway for her birth certificate so she could obtain health insurance. While Petway was stalling, White visited the Connecticut Bureau of Vital Statistics, where a clerk was unable to find any records under her name and birth date, which White was of attempting... accused... Whoa. The clerk then accused White of attempting to obtain false identity and flagged the case to the Department of Children and Family. A few days later, Petway confessed that she was not White's birth mother, but claimed White had been abandoned by her parents at birth. When Petway refused to offer any further information, White's suspicions grew, and she spent the next several years searching for stories of kidnappings in the Bridgeport area. It wasn't until 2011, when she was 23 living in Atlanta, that she decided to try expanding her search outside of Connecticut and found a photo of a baby who had been abducted in 1987 and looked just like her own young daughter on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. She called the center's hotline in December 2010, encouraged and aided by Petway's sister, Cassandra Johnson, per the Connecticut Post. With the center's help, she was ultimately able to narrow down her search for the parents with two possible cases. After comparing baby photos of Nedra and Carolina's with White sporting the same birthmark on her arm and as baby Carolina, the New York PD contacted Joy and Carl for DNA samples. Even before the DNA samples were complete, with all three feeling certain it would be a match, White began talking to Joy and Carl on the phone, and it flew to New York to meet them in early 2011. Finally, as White was about to board her plane back home to Atlanta, the NYPD contacted her to confirm to her that the DNA matched Joy and Carl's. And so that is actually pretty crazy. So where are they now? Where are they now? Though White distanced herself from her own birth parent for some time after their initial reunion due to overwhelming media attention and her complicated feelings for the family that raised her, she told New York in late 2011 that they were on good terms and spoke occasionally on the phone. She told the magazine of her plans to revert to her birth name, but said she would still go by Nettie as the name is not since the name is not what the Petway family gave me, and not what the White family gave me. It's what I gave myself. White had not been heard from since late 2011, presumably hoping to give herself and family a normal life as possible now that her lifelong mystery has been solved. For her part, Petway turned herself into the authorities in January 2011 and pleaded guilty to federal kidnapping charges. The New York Times reported at the time that it was only one federal kidnapping charge, not charges. My bad. She apologized for her crime in her sentencing hearing in 2011 when her lawyers reportedly argued that she was motivated not by greed or the desire to do harm, but by the desperate desire for a child combined with depression and grief over her failed pregnancies with significant mental illness. Though White didn't appear at Petway's trial, her birth parents gave emotional testimonies at the sentencing. In his, Carl told Petway, "What you should get is 23 years. Which is what you took away from me," while Joy said, "I'm broken into a million pieces." Petway was ultimately sentenced to only 12 years in prison. And that is the story of Carolina White's kidnapping and how she solved her own case, which is crazy because, when I was a kid and I used to get mad at my parents, I would, look up myself and be like, am I kidnapped? Are there parents out there? No, I'm serious. I was a weird kid. I was a weird kid, man. So give me 1 second. I'm going to grab some water and we'll be right back. So next up here, we're going to talk about this one's been bothering me for a while, and I'm sure it's been bothering some of you for a while that I've been into true crime. But this is the disappearance of Jennifer Kresse. Jennifer Joyce Kesse was born on May 20th, 1981. She was an American woman from Orlando, Florida, who has been missing since January 23rd, 2006. It's a long time. That's 15 years and 2 months, just about 15 years and 2 months. Shortly after she vanished, her car was discovered parked about a mile from her home. A local security camera recorded a person who could not be identified parking Kesse's car and then walking away. The case received local and national press attention, and you can literally see the guy who killed her walking in front of the security camera. But the problem is that the security camera records in 1 frame per second. So every time that he would walk by, his face would be covered up by a pillar by the fence. Every time. And there's no, you can't go through and refine it. Once the frame is taken, the frame's taken. There's no between frames. People who don't know how video editing works or whatever, that's not, if videos are just a lot of pictures one by one. That's 60 frames per second. When most people watch videos, it's 60 frames per second. That's 60 pictures every second in front of your eyes that make that video. And when they go down to 30, that's when you start to notice it's kind of a choppy. When it's down to 1, it's when you get that old school security video from gas station style stuff. That's what we're talking about here. So it wasn't very good footage, which is why, guys, if you're going to get a security system, just get a decent security system. Get one that you can actually see detail. If a car drives by your house and you can't see the license plate, it's a shitty security system. There are very good, the Reolink PoE security system, you can get that. And plus, don't do the Blink ones and the Ring ones that Amazon has all your shit. No. Don't do that. There's nothing good that can come from giving up your data to a giant company all the time. There's nothing good that can come from that. If your cameras are especially inside your house, that better be on a DVR that's only on your network, that only you and whoever you want to see can see it. Because if it's on the cloud, I've just got news for you. It's going over an open internet. I know it's encrypted, but it's still going over an open internet, and people can still break into it. So camera systems need to be good, and they need to be secure to you and only you, not to anyone else. It needs to be secure for you. It's how it needs to work. It's just how it needs to work. So I know that's not really the trendy thing to say, since everyone's got those doorbells and stuff now, but those are not. I mean, it's better than nothing. But if you're really worried about your privacy and your security, you'll get an NVR, like a real link, and you can get it for the same price as getting all the Amazon cameras. So that's just my little PSA. Let's get back on track here. So prior to this, she graduated from Vivian Gather High School in Tampa, Florida, and she attended the University of Central Florida in Orlando and graduated in 2003 with a degree in finance. At the time of her disappearance, she was working as a finance manager at Central Florida Investments timeshare company in Ocoee. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. And she recently had bought a condo in Orlando. The weekend before she vanished, Kesse had vacationed with her boyfriend in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Returning on the Sunday, she stayed that night at her boyfriend's home, then drove straight to work on the morning of Monday, January 23rd, 2006. So into her disappearance, Kesse was seen for the last time leaving work at approximately 6 p.m. on January 23, 2006. She spoke by phone with her father while driving home at around 6:15, and then went with her boyfriend around 10 p.m. She was in the habit of texting or telephoning her boyfriend before leaving work, so it was unusual when she did neither of that thing the next morning. His call to her went to voicemail when he tried to call her. When Kesse failed to arrive at work, her employer contacted her parents, who began the 2-hour drive from their from their home to hers. When her parents noticed that her car was missing but saw nothing out of the ordinary in her home, it freaked them out. They saw a wet towel and clothes laid out, among other things, suggested that she had showered and prepared for work that morning. Friends and family distributed flyers about Kesse, and the Orlando Police Department organized search parties on foot and by horseback, as well as by boat, helicopter, car, ATV, and by, obviously foot. It says pedestrian, but that's the same thing as foot. So let's go over these timestamps here based on some witness statements that we've been able to pull up here. So on Monday, January 26, 2006, at 6 p.m., Kesse leaves work and calls her parents. The last time her family hears from her is at this time. She arrives home for the first time since having left for vacation. 10 p.m., Kesse and her boyfriend talk by phone and say their goodnights. He is the last known person to speak with her before her disappearance. On Tuesday, January 24th, 2006 at 7:30 a.m., investigators initially believed that Kesse was abducted and she was walking from her front door to her car. They now believe that she left and was abducted at some point on her way to work. At 8 p.m. to 9 a.m., or 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., sorry. These are all a.m., not p.m. yet. Kesse's boyfriend, who normally would have heard from her, calls her on the way to work, and it goes directly to voicemail. He chalks it up to a meeting, as she had mentioned to him earlier. His subsequent attempts were likewise unsuccessful, and Kesse's parents call him to say that she had failed to show up to work. At 11 a.m., alarmed at Kesse's uncharacteristic no-call, no-show, her employer contacts her parents, who begin to drive from Tampa to Orlando. On the way, they call to ask the manager of her condo and check her home with a spare key. He reports that everything appears normal inside and that her car is missing outside. 12 p.m., only 1.2 miles away from her home, surveillance cameras at an apartment complex record a person in the act of parking her car and walking away. The car and footage are not discovered until 2 days later. 3 p.m. until 3:15 p.m., Kesse's parents and brother arrive at her apartment and then find evidence that she had been home that morning. They call the police. As Kesse is an adult, police initially hold that she may have left on her own volition. Highly doubtful, though, based on everything that we've heard. So, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., families and friends saturate the area with flyers that show Kesse's picture. The police send a detective to her home and begin interrogations and searches. On Thursday, January 26th at 8:10 a.m., seeing Kesse's car on the news, a tenant of a nearby complex informs the police that it has sat abandoned in front of their apartment for several days. Police confirm that it is Kesse's 2004 Chevy Malibu. The vehicle is photographed and taken in for forensic investigation. Police examined local surveillance footage and discovered an unidentified person parking her car and walking away. That's what I was talking about earlier with those really garbage security cameras. And reminder, this is in 2006, so this isn't the best security cameras, but if you still have these security cameras today in 2021, you're wrong. You should probably change that. The investigation goes up with no sign of forced entry or a struggle. Investigators initially theorized that on the morning of January 24th, Kesse left her apartment for work and locked her front door only to be abducted at some point while walking towards or getting into her vehicle. On January 26th at around 8:10 a.m., her black 2004 Chevy Malibu was found parked at another apartment complex a mile away from her own. Investigators were excited to learn that several hidden cameras at the apartment surveilled the parking lot where the car had been parked, as well as the exit. The surveillance footage shows an unidentified person of interest dropping Kesse's car off at approximately noon on the day that she went missing. None of her family or friends recognized the person whose physical features were not clear on the video. I mean, if you saw the video, which you should definitely look up this video. It would be very hard to recognize because you can't really see him walk. You can just see like images of this guy mid-step. You know, it's hard to catch a mannerism like that. Investigators were disheartened to find that the best video capture of this subject in 3 separate snapshots was obscured by the complex fencing. The posts were aligning to conceal his face. The journalist called the suspect the luckiest person of interest ever. The FBI was called in to help investigate and determine the person's size and gender, but could only say that the person stood between 5'3" and 5'5". So no gender, even though I've been calling him he the whole time. It just looks like a guy, in my opinion. NASA also enhanced the video to help identify the suspect. Detectives interpreted the valuables left inside the car to imply that robbery was not a motive in the case. A search dog tracked down the scent that led a detective from her parked car to the back of her apartment complex, prompting detectives to believe that the person may have returned to her apartment parking lot after abandoning the car. No other evidence was found along the route. A forensic examination of the car yielded little in the way of evidence, only a latent print and a small DNA fiber. Investigators deduced that her car had been wiped down. The following items are known to be missing: her cell phone, her iPod, her keys, her purse, her briefcase, and the outfit she was wearing that morning. Authorities were unable to ping her cell phone. Its power has been remaining off. Her bank account keycard has not been used since her disappearance. As is customary, investigators first questioned Kesse's immediate family and close friends to see if any of them could have had a motive to abduct her. Her ex-boyfriend, recently upset and wishing to get back together with her, was also interrogated, but it was concluded that he had nothing to do with her abduction. Her current boyfriend was also questioned, but his alibi completely checked out, eliminating him as a suspect. At the time of her disappearance, Kesse's condominium complex had been undergoing a major expansion, and many of the laborers on site were non-English speaking. Kesse had told family members on several occasions that construction workers were consistently catcalling her, whistling at her, and harassing her. Due to the language barrier, investigators were unable to interrogate any of them, which seems like bullshit because, like, you can definitely find people who speak fucking Spanish, but okay. No other leads regarding them were discovered. Detectives then turned their focus to her place of employment and began questioning her coworkers. Her computer was taken for a forensic forensic examination. It was learned that a manager where she had worked had desired a relationship with her, but that she had refused his advances because she was against workplace relationships. Detectives interviewed him multiple times, but ultimately ruled him out as a suspect. Investigators and Kesse's friends and family remain open to a theory that she fell victim to human trafficking, but consider it less likely than the other theories. In May 2007, Kesse's company, led by David A. Siegel, offered a $1 million reward for information leading to her whereabouts, with a July 4th deadline and the stipulation that she has to be found alive. It was never claimed. A $5,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of her remains was available through the Central Florida crime line. The case received state and national press attention at the time of her disappearance, and she is still considered missing and endangered by the Orlando Police Department, the FBI, Orange County Police, FDLE, the NCIC, NCMA, and Interpol Police. On May 2, 2008, the Florida House of Representatives unanimously passed Senate Bill 502, the Jennifer Kresse and Tiffany Sessions Missing Persons Act, to reform how missing persons cases are handled in Florida. As of May 10, 2010, the FBI has taken the case over from the Orlando Police Department. It did so at the asking of Police Chief Val Demings. Kesse remains one of the FBI's most wanted missing people, and the latest search for her took place in February of 2014, with investigators continue to receive and pursue leads. And those are the stories of Carolina White and Jennifer Kresse. I don't even know what to say. I don't know what I would do if someone that I knew and loved just vanished, up and vanished, disappeared, because it's almost harder than knowing that I've never had a friend get murdered, but, I have had a friend get murdered, but, yeah, I don't know. I've never had a friend get abducted and missing, so I wouldn't know that pain, but it just seems to me that being able to attend my friend's funeral and get closure on that is a little better than just not knowing at all what happened, period. And that I don't know if that opinion is shared by anyone else, but that's just kind of how I feel about that. So those are today's stories. I want to thank you for coming along with me, and this has been another episode of American Homicide. Thanks.